What's Your Work Fit is sponsored by Hudson. What's Your Work Fit is sponsored by Hudson Davis. Start your brand's marketing and communications journey today at hudsondaviscommunications.com. I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin here from What's Your Work Fit. I apologize for the technical glitches at the beginning. Hopefully you've been able to ride through them. I am so excited today. We're back with live shows. I have a great show coming up momentarily, but I also wanted to mention that our What's Your Work Fit in the Workplace series continues again next week. We are going to be asking the question, why are we gathering for work anyway? And I'm going to be joined by my co-hosts, Mark Gilbreth from Liquid Space and Fran Saley, who some of you have gotten to discover on LinkedIn. He is doing reporter's work, talking about the future of work as it relates to return to the office, or as Fran calls it, return to the past. We're going to have a great show next week. I hope you will join us. But let's talk about today. I am so pleased to bring back my dear friend, Shelley Goldstein. How are you, my friend?
Oh, always good to be here in a conversation with you, Dan. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, my pleasure. I've been so hoping to get you back on, because the last time you were on, it just generated a lot of good cheer and a lot of hopefulness. And if I can leave people with hopefulness, I think that's a good thing. Okay, so let me tell you about Shelley. Shelley is an internationally acclaimed public speaking coach who helps clients gain the confidence that they need to become effective and captivating communicators in the workplace and in life. Good gig if you can get it, Shelley. Okay, let's get to this week's question. It was submitted by one of our viewers. His name is Idris. Hey, Idris, thanks for submitting your question today. Idris is a knowledge worker in the Chicagoland area, out in the Chicago suburbs, who loved the camaraderie that he felt existed before the pandemic shut everything down. In 2022, his company gave up their big headquarters office out in the burbs and adopted a more distributed workplace model, which Idris says is at best a work in progress. I get that. While he and his teammates do gather in real life, Idris feels as if his own humanness has taken a hit. During most of his day, he's stuck in front of a screen for team meetings and client presentations, and he feels that he no longer relates well to others in his work and more broadly in his life. So Idris asks you, Shelley Goldstein, how do I present as a human at work? How do you answer him?
Great question. Lot of lot to unpack there.
Mm,
You mentioned earlier my work is about helping people become effective speakers in the workplace and in life. And I want to just sit there with that idea, workplace and in life. I
mhm,
didn't separate the two. My question to answer his question would
yeah,
be, is there a difference? Meaning, you're Dan Smolin. Are you
right,
Dan? Is there a weekend Dan? Is there a family Dan? Is there a interview Dan? Is there a
right.
workplace Dan? We are ourselves. And I think the goal is that we have the opportunity to show up as ourselves everywhere in the workplace and in life. That's what I want to see. I want to see who you are for who you are.
You asked the question. I am the same person in work and in life. We're not like the TV show Severance, where work and life are completely disengaged. That's not how we roll now. I think the biggest part of the future of work is we want to be present. We want to be human in both work and life, and they happen at the same time, I think.
I would pose that to Idris and other people. We put so much of ourselves into our work. I care about what I do as a coach. I
Yeah.
put so much energy and time into it. I do some educational things. I read books. I practice. I talk to people. I come on interviews.
Hmm.
I'm furthering and investing in myself as a corporate trainer on speaking
Hmm.
to serve people. It means
Right.
a lot to me. And when my clients respond to that and they grow and they advance, nothing more gives me pleasure.
Mm,
So, putting all that time and investment that I do in my work, is that something you do in your career? And does it require you to show up as yourself
right.
fully?
Right. I want to get to Helena's question. She says, "At what point was there a tipping point that the screen is the thing that makes people feel disconnected? Is it just that in real life, the in real life thing is now an option for some? So, in comparison, screens are a poor substitute?" It's an interesting question because, and thank you, Helena. I think that oftentimes it's the screen that for a lot of people delineates where they're working. And yet, a lot of people are stuck in a co-location and on Zoom calls all day, even though they're in a co-location and there are other people surrounded by them. How do you relate to this question?
100%, Helena. That's me.
Mm,
When I went down the journey of improving my own public communication, my public speaking skills,
yeah.
it was long before COVID. I was presenting in person and online back when, GoToWebinar was a big deal and we were using Skype.
Mm,
And I didn't feel like I was connecting. And
mhm,
I started my journey in learning how to be a better speaker there. So, what was different? How is it different now that many of us are on screen? I'm going to challenge you in saying I haven't found that there is a difference. If I feel confident in who I am and what I have to say,
mhm.
what does it matter the circumstances, whether I'm on screen or I'm on stage or I'm in a conference room? Now, yes, there's a lot of elements of person and person, but I could still have a good conversation with you here today. I'm not taking any of this for granted or assuming things any less or more than if we were in person.
I want to get to Claire's question. I don't know her well. She works in HR. And she says, "Some talent in my company do feel less connected, even if they are gathered." And here's the interesting thing she's saying, because this is part of her job. She's saying, "I'm having a difficult time broaching this topic with senior management." And in desperation, she says, "How can we fix it?" I think before we can fix it, how do we begin the conversation to address it with senior management? What are your thoughts?
This is incredible. And yes, we're feeling less connected even when we're gathered. To my point about doesn't matter if you're in person or on screen,
Hmm.
it's a mindset. Nothing necessarily has really changed. If we're not feeling confident and we're not feeling that there's a space where we can share our ideas openly and freely, again, the circumstances are secondary. And I would suggest to Claire
Hmm.
raising your hand,
Hmm.
introducing an idea in a meeting and just asking, what about this? Or that's an interesting question, or
Hmm.
pose a question to the senior management to get their response on a particular topic. Asking questions, being curious is the best way to start a conversation and engage. And we need to engage senior management in conversations. And you have that opportunity to do that by raising your hand and asking the question. Now, they may not respond.
Yeah.
That might not be your work fit. The culture may be such that they're resistant. However, why not try? You don't know until you get there.
I think that, so what are we now? Almost 4 years into this experience, this pandemic, pre-pandemic, pandemic, post-pandemic epoch, if you will. um, and a couple of things happen simultaneously, especially for knowledge workers. On one hand, the laptop or the computer at home or wherever they may be enabled them to crush productivity. They got more work done, they got more projects done, they ended up working longer hours, they did more head down work. Great. My wife, who teaches gifted kids in a public school, was alongside me at home on the screen, and she's dealing with all these truly gifted kids, some of whom are neurodivergent. And what she noticed is the screen took away our feels, it took away our soft skills. And I think this is part of why this conversation with you and me is resonating so much, is because it's not the work and it's not the words, but sometimes it's the fact that we became fish out of water and this technology became a filter for you, for lack of a better term, or a conduit, if you will, for communicating with people. And some of us have learned to do it well. You and I have a really good relationship. We have not met in real life, and yet we've had these deep dive conversations that feel like the best of friends.
I'll agree to that.
Thank you. I would say, though, that may be more of an outlying experience for people who are doing knowledge work, who are used to being in a room and kind of getting, being in the room and seeing how people respond to them non-verbally, the energy they give off. And so regardless of where we are, even if we are sitting next to each other in a meeting or in a co-location or whatever, something happened to us that we have to relearn how to be people.
Or maybe just learn for the first time. I mean, there are all hands meetings where
Yeah.
people are on digital Zoom meetings all day long and their cameras are turned off.
Hmm.
I want to ask, how is that different than going into a conference and you're sitting in the back of the room and you're sulking in your chair and you're not raising your hand? If you want to make yourself invisible, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
If you hit the raise hand button in a Zoom meeting or you
Right.
raise your hand physically, you're now visible. And
Right.
I think the work it's not so much how do we change the surroundings? We need to accept that the surroundings are changing, and how can we adapt and continue to co-partner with these changing scenarios to still advance who we are. But if you're behind the scenes before and you're still behind the scenes now in these different circumstances, the work is different. It's the mindset of why you're still not showing up.
When we ask, how do I present as a human at work? Is the importance of that question not only am I seen and heard, but how do I be a caring, intentional partner in a process? What are your
Well,
thoughts?
it's not how do I be myself, you're asking. How do I be personal? I'm a person. And that's what I asked earlier, I presented earlier about the workplace and in life. There's not a weekend Dan.
Yeah.
Weekend Dan is the same Dan who's in the workplace. So when we're presenting, there is something that we default to this robotic behavior.
Right.
We resort to this idea that we're supposed to be in a framework that's not human. Now, there's nothing wrong with structure. Structure is good, but your words, your feelings, your humanness is so important in presenting. Who said you have to read a slide deck like you're Siri?
Yeah, right.
So we put these ideas in our head that this is the way it is. And the truth is, what connects in presenting is being personal, about sharing the information, about telling stories and ideas and experiences behind the data. Make it interesting. It's engaging. A presentation is just another way of sharing a story, reinterpreting the data, and expressing that in heartfelt terms as yourself. The team just finished this particular project, and it was amazing because Joe really pulled the bootstraps up and leaded us to the end because he put in the extra hours and he added this extra widget.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to thank Joe for doing that. And that's why the numbers are X, Y, and Z.
Very effective. I think some people would be more drawn to their own humanness if they felt a sense of connection, that they did something positive that impacted the group, rather than to be called out for their birthday.
Right.
Because you're not working at work to have friends. You're working at work to earn a living, but also to make a difference in a bigger business type setting. I want to get to David's comment. David says, or asks, does presenting as human involve being transparent and honest about making mistakes? That's an interesting question. What do you think?
I think it's our unfair advantage, especially with AI.
Yeah.
AI is a machine learning program that is very exacting, and it makes a mistake only because it's not what we're getting. That's not a result we want. The machine doesn't know it's making a mistake. We, by making mistakes, by having mishaps and being messy, is the root of invention and creation. We don't, the Wright brothers just didn't wake up one morning and say, we're going to fly. It was many, many decades of people thinking about robotics and flying and aviation that led to that moment. And it was a lot of mistakes. Science is all about mistakes and taking crapshoots. We have to keep trying. That is humanness. So please, yes, be transparent in your experience, because the mistakes are the story. It's the hero's journey that we connect with in the most beautiful way. And what is not more emotional in business than failing and losing a client, winning a client, losing money, gaining money? All those things are very emotional, very human instances. And it's part of, again, a business is about people. It's not a brick building.
I want to offer a personal perspective. So many years ago, when we lived in Minnesota, I had the 3M company as a client. And what's the 3M company all about? It's about things blowing up in the lab, letting it cool, scraping it off the walls and saying, this looks interesting. I'm wondering if I can do something with it.
Yeah.
Now, I mention this because this is a long time ago, and yet I can share with you that the then ethos in 3M was to celebrate the blowups and to celebrate the scientists who were in the lab and had the bravery to push the limits to see what would happen. And the corporate communications that would call those people out for their brilliant failures was both astonishing and beautiful, because it was like, keep trying, keep trying. You're onto something. Analyze it, figure out what it can do, try something else. If it blows up in the lab, great. We'll learn from it, right?
Dan, could I just add something? You mentioned
Sure.
3M, and one of the biggest failures, mistakes, was when they were trying to develop a strong adhesive glue. And I believe the weakness of the glue, it didn't quite adhere,
Right.
which mistakenly led to Post-its.
That is absolutely correct. So the story, as I remember, and it's a little mangled because it's a long time ago, was that the person who was involved in that, um, on weekends, he would go to his Lutheran church and sing in the choir. And he took that adhesive and he put it on the notes on the top, and he wrote little notes in his hymnal as to where to come in, what words to emphasize, and so forth. And he took that experience back to corporate, and the rest is history. We can do something with this. A huge business. Oh my gosh. Early 1980s, huge business came out of nowhere because something in terms of an adhesive didn't have a lot of tensile strength, and yet it was tacky enough to sit nicely on a piece of paper or on a leaf in a hymnal or a book. It could be written on, on a Post-it note, and then you could peel it off without damaging what it was being held onto.
So Dan, to answer our questions today,
Mhm.
speaking up and showing up,
Yeah.
if this person had stayed in their lane and just worked on adhesive
Yeah.
and didn't bring this concept to the team or
Right.
his bosses, could we have missed an opportunity? That person took the stance to stand up, to be transparent, to share an idea, to be expressive about something he experienced personally into the
Right.
work realm. And again, as you said, the rest is history. So what opportunities are we missing by only having, limiting ourselves to certain dialogues in the office, on screen, and not?
I want to guide this conversation in a different direction, and that is because the biggest portion of the workforce right now is becoming Gen Z. I have a Gen Z daughter. She learned at school this irrational behavior of trying to be perfect about everything,
Mm.
right? Now these folks have gotten out of college or are getting out of college, and they want to try to penetrate the work world. And one of the fears that they have is, I don't want to make mistakes. Well, when you're young and you're entering the workforce, you are going to be expected to make mistakes. That's why your bosses are going to give you more than you can handle on your plate at any one time, right? Or at least we hope that's the case. Um, this kind of learning not only helps us do our jobs better, it learns how to how to be people in a work setting, how to listen, and do other things. And to that end, I want to bring up something which I found from Mindful, which and some of these are debatable. They call them 8 tips for leading a human workplace. Number 1, build respect, psychological safety.
Mm.
Number 2, I'll put an asterisk by, create a shared sense of meaning. 3, increase team innovation, creativity, and purpose. 4, surround yourself with different perspectives. Well, that's really important. 5, choose where to focus your attention in the workplace. 6, release attachment to your emotions. I think that's really, really important. 7, perceive challenges as opportunities for growth. Number 8, which I just mentioned, listen deeply. That listening part is really important. But I want to ask you about a shared sense of meaning.
Mm.
Um, yes and no, right? Your sense of purpose at work may be alike and different from others at the same time, don't you think?
Absolutely. We all have different ideas, but that could be interpreted so many different ways.
Right.
For me, when I read that statement, I think of connecting. And when we share these stories, when the person walked into the team and said, "Hey, I have this
Yeah.
post-it thing," and shared the idea of what they discovered, that story was something that the people he was sharing it with connected with. And they shared a different sense of meaning behind that. It's your meaning and my meaning, but we share a different meaning perhaps behind this one action.
Mm.
So to me, it's about connection and communicating and sharing those ideas and being able to speak up. That's the connection of sharing a shared sense of meaning.
Christine Passo said the word mistake would be wonderful to embrace as a learning curve versus something that shouldn't have happened. I couldn't agree more. What do you think?
Yeah, a friend of mine says, "Stop shooting all over yourselves." We we put so much pressure on ourselves. We should have, we need to, we must do. Let's be kind to ourselves and just
Yeah.
say, "I'm doing it. This is what I'm doing."
That's what my late mother-in-law would call woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was a social worker. She dealt with that a lot with her clients. But it relates to somebody that is never comfortable with how things unfold, that they weren't impactful enough in their own minds. They weren't perfect enough. And we have to disabuse ourselves of this notion because when we stick to that, we do end up being robotic like Siri. I just said Siri and my phone lit up because that's what happens now. Christine also put in another comment prior to going on live, and she said, "I felt more of a human, being more of a human during the pandemic because we were all faced with the realities of being humans as parents, siblings, and caretakers, and of course, dog parents. Is it more about being human or actually about connection? What do you think?"
For me, I'm not sure there's a difference. Connecting is humanness.
Yeah,
That's what we are as beings. We're emotional beings.
yeah,
That's human nature. And emotion brings up love, want, share, connect, all types of emotions, anger. And I think the notion of separating those two ideas isn't very effective. It also, I don't know how you would even isolate each one.
mm,
Being human is connecting. That's what human is about. That's what connecting is about. And when we share these ideas, when we share these stories and our journeys, and we're seeing a lot of people are writing in with beautiful questions, and
mm,
others are going, "Yeah, me too." That's the
mhm,
connection.
mhm. What opportunities do you think we've not uncovered that we probably should have uncovered coming out of the pandemic, and how it's changed work and where we're working, and are we working from anywhere, or are we back to a traditional office? What humanness factors do you think people should be doing more often that they're not?
But we're not shitting all over ourselves. So what
That's
can we do?
that's
What
true.
can we do? One is something that Rich Litvin talks about quite a bit. He's a coach, and he said, or maybe it was Byron Katie, accept 1,000 no's. And what they meant by that was, if you start your day accepting no,
Mhm.
imagine if you got that no on the first call, you'd be like, "Wow, I hit a goal." And then
Oh, I love
you
that.
approach the same idea with mistakes. Let me go out and see the possibilities. And things aren't going to work out perfectly, but what you may make a mess of in a pan as you're baking a beautiful cake, and you try something and it actually works, now
Yeah.
you've got a great cookie with 10 bad cookies. So the idea being is, let's embrace where we are. This roller coaster of apps and AI and all kinds of tools that we have are tools. They're not going away. Embrace the idea of what if? How can I utilize those tools to make my day more efficient and leave room for the creativity and the mistakes and coexist in those things, as opposed to fighting where we are online, embracing it and saying, if this is where I have to be, great. I can speak to somebody halfway around the world. How fantastic is that? And I can go out my door and meet somebody for a cup of coffee. Another way of being fantastic.
So you bring up AI, and it's a trigger point for a lot of people. The no bound people will say, yeah, but it's going to get rid of all these jobs in the next 5 to 10 years. But the yes bound people are going to say, okay, yes, that's true. However, think about all the new work that's going to come on board to support these technologies, to monetize them, to make them more human, to make them tools rather than things that drive our lives.
I'll give you the example of the assembly line. AI is not new. Machine learning is not new. It's
Right.
been around for decades. And if you look at the auto industry, when they came up with the assembly lines and everybody was very worried about losing jobs, and sure, there were jobs lost, no question. The efficiency of those tools made better vehicles, made better productivity. However, those people had the opportunity to upskill and reskill.
Right.
And learn something new. You still need somebody to program and watch those machines. You still need a human to decipher and quality control the product. There are areas always available for us and ones we don't even know that exist. So it's an opportunity to go out there and say yes and, as opposed to no, I can't do it.
Say yes and. If we leave you with any one thought in this show today, say yes and. I love that. Shelley, this has been a lot of fun. I'm going to pivot now to a question that you got to answer that I asked you back several months ago. I'm going to show you now the video in which you answered the question, what's your work fit? And for those who don't know how I describe it, what's your work fit means what attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes work a wonderful part of your day, doing many other wonderful and meaningful things, and not just the all-consuming time suck of a day. So here's Shelley's answer.
My work fit is speaking up and showing up, because when I share that idea of what's important to me about the work that I do, why I do it, I understand the people that align with me, that's the fit. I'm not here to convince somebody that they need something I have to offer. No, it's here's what I believe, here's what I've experienced. And if somebody aligns with that, they'll join and say, hey, I want to know more about it. And that's the conversation. That's the fit for me.
I love that. Has that changed at all, or is that still your work fit?
It's still my work fit. I mean, we started talking about that today. Conversation, just speaking up. That's how this started, and that's been the theme throughout.
Showing up. I think if I were to take no and, I would add to that, showing up is really important to the humanness factor of work right now. Being present doesn't necessarily mean being in somebody's grill all the time, but it does mean being intentional. It does mean being a really good team player. And even from that list that I showed you, it's the listening skills. It's being empathic.
Raise your hand and ask the question. Be curious, engage. That's showing up.
So, Shelley, I know our viewers are going to want to reach out to you. Where can they find you on social media? How can they get in touch with you and start a conversation?
Oh, I love the conversation. You can go to speakersresources.com, and that'll take you right to my website where there's tons of resources, and you could also connect with me there.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming back. I know we will have you back again. You're such a wonderful guest. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
this has been a blast as always, and thank you. And great questions. What an audience you have. Really made the difference.
Questions are everything. Thank you.